Hello Final Fantasy fans, and welcome back to another deck spotlight. This week we're going to be covering the Fire Ice deck that we played in our duel series, if you've seen that already, called Sabin Suplex. Now this is a very requested list. We've had quite a few comments about it, and this is Red Mage Matt's brew that he's evolved over the past few weeks of the Opus IV Meta. So this is, quite flexible, kind of more of a building point, if you want to play something this week, and it's likely a good candidate for topping. The Fire Ice lists themselves, some have focused on more discard, some have focused on more ping effect, but this really takes two popular shells and puts them into the same deck with some great efficiency behind them. So is Fire Ice still going to be staying relevant in the meta? We absolutely believe so, and this is going to be a good place to start, as I've mentioned. So let's get right into it. Everyone has been so excited about Final Fantasy VI coming to the trading card game. With this, we've seen a variety of popular characters who have come in with the thanks of a backup that we're going to talk about later that makes this all possible. Now, individually, they all kind of do their own thing. Yes, Locke does require the assistance of some other characters, and Setzer is one of the other tutors or searchers in this deck, but individually, they do their own thing, and they are quite strong at what they want to be doing. So we're going to talk about Locke first. So as we mentioned, you do need to control two or more Category 6 characters other than Locke. I want to stress here that it does say characters, so that does include backups, which you'll find later on. That is going to be a heaven send that it's not forwards like we've seen in some other cards. Makes it very easy to pull off this effect. It's going to make your opponent discard a card from their hand. So a 3-drop 7k is on par for our power to cost ratio, and making them discard a card is always great. Then when he deals damage to your opponent, they have to discard a card as well. So we've seen this effect with Genesis, and it continues to be strong here. What's nice is we do have the S effect, cannot be blocked. So Fire Ice is known for having this more aggressive build to it, and it can be really difficult to get in those final points of damage when necessary, unless you have, a Shiva Belias turn that can help push through. So Locke always has the ability to threaten, not only if your opponent is going to have to discard a card, where, we're Fire Ice, so we have things like Selfie to make him bigger, we can use Belias, etc. But Mirage Dive is very scary when your opponent starts getting to 5 or 6 points. So that is something that makes him a all-star in this list. Celeste, if you've watched our duel series, can be very strong when you're using her S effect, of course, when you use it appropriately. So you get to choose a summon and cancel its effect. Not only that, which is often going to be good enough. If we're going to be honest, you're not going to be using it for the second effect primarily. It's going to be your opponent's playing some big flashy spell like Bahamut or Raiden that they think is going to win them the game. And just by canceling it, you're being able to either, stabilize in that sense, or depending on how much cards they're going to be discarding to pay for the crystal points, it can be a very dramatic swing in your favor. So Celeste being a 4-drop AK, again, perfect. Power to cost, which is again rare for Ice, and maybe that's why both of these are the legendaries outside of their effects being great, but she does have the option to freeze a character. So again, we have the option that maybe we need to lock down a backup, maybe we need to lock down a Cactar. There's many things that she can do. And Matt and I have had quite a bit of discussion around this card, and one of the main things that can be very helpful is if you notice that your opponent is getting stuck on maybe one of their colors, they go through most of the game, they don't see it, and then they finally get that key turn where they land their first water backup, and let's say that they're playing Water Lightning, for example. By being able to freeze that backup, you can hurt your opponent's turn by not giving them the access to what they thought they were going to have, and then maybe they don't have another water card to discard or whatever the element you tap down. So she can be very versatile in what she wants to do. And then again, when it deals damage to your opponent, so all these on-hit effects, deal 4,000 damage to a dulled forward. Now again, this is going to be great with Vivi, this is going to be great with Cid that we're going to talk about, the ping one. So there's a lot of that she can be doing as well. Both these cards are fantastic. But perhaps the one that I am most excited about, or I believe deserves the most attention, is Sabin himself. When he enters a field or attacks, a forward you can control cannot be broken for this turn. And as we all know, Red wants to turn things sideways anyway, so you're building into that case. And he also has the effect that you can threaten to buff him by 2,000 power. Yes, it's only while he's attacking, so that is, it doesn't come up all the time, but it is quite relevant where he can't do it on defense, or if your opponent is just playing around it, you can deal 8,000 exactly, and there's not much red decks can do outside of, say, a Belias. And then lastly, his Rising Phoenix, deal 8,000 damage to all forwards. So you can, again, use his, only when attacking, you can, use his S, buff him by 2,000, and protect one of your other forwards that might only be a 7 or a 6k, and be able to push through for a lot of damage. So Sabin is something to absolutely consider in not only Fire Ice lists, but all Fire decks going forward. 4-drop 8k with this many effects is absolutely insane. And then, of course, we need to bring it all together, and that's where we have Setzer. Now, he is a little bit high-costed if we look at just the 5 CP to 7,000 power ratio, but when he enters the field, you get to search for a Category 6 character. Again, this is a character, not just a forward, which is great, and add it to your hand. But not only that, because you'll notice he doesn't have an EX burst like, say, Steiner, but when he's put from the field into the break zone, you get to dull and freeze one of your opponent's forwards. So this guy is a search and a Shiva on a 7k body, and for that, it is absolutely worth paying the cost. Obviously, if you're playing the kind of Final Fantasy VI package, you're already going to be playing him, but the amount of value that he can generate is going to help you pull ahead in the game. Now, not only that, but we do have a few Final Fantasy IX cards in this list, and as we've seen in previous Fire Ice brews, these go very well together, and I think have been a mainstay since Opus 3, the start of Opus 3, I should say. So we have the starter Vivi, which is really just nice to be able to threaten 5,000 damage or 8,000. Vivi here is kind of really the monsters before it was cool, because he's a 2-drop forward that you are often paying 2 more to break him. So yes, he's technically a forward, but I think he was like the precursor to monsters, if we feel like it. You know, we knew monsters were coming, but his design kind of speaks to that a little bit more. But he is just kind of in the deck just in case. The legendary Vivi is really what we want to be using. Then we have the 3-drop Kuja, another staple in Ice, which doesn't need a lot of introduction. It's important to note that those are 2 separate effects. You can pay one of anything and one of Ice, and dull and freeze different targets if you choose, because each of the effects target. So it can really help, you know, lock down one card for another turn and freeze another, or dull another, freeze one, I should say. Then we have the legendary Vivi, which everyone has been a fan of for just kind of this tempo play, being able to remove one of your opponent's forwards, play a, unfortunately, most of the time irrelevant powered forward, but it does remove something of your opponent, so it makes it all worth it. The special on legendary Vivi, you know, in maybe 20 games you might activate it once. It's something that hasn't really been in a good spot to use, and in this deck we have at quite a number of 7,000 damage forwards, but it is important to note that you could do something like use Sabin to protect 2 and pump himself, and then use this to clear the way for the 2, which is a lot of resources, effectively 7, because 5 crystal points total, and then the S effect for Vivi. So it is a lot of resources, but there are these, you know, alternate realities of plays that you can make that are going to help push through those last point of damage when you really need it. And then Zidane coming in because, you know what, we're playing Kuja and Vivi, so it's really going to be read this card as a 2 cost almost always, and then you do get to draw a card off of it. Not often are you going to be activating, you know, one of your Category 9 characters. Discarding can be relevant too, depending on if you have like a Serah and Cid turn where maybe you make them discard another turn on following, but it's a 7k power forward that can draw us a card, and when we have a Selfie online as a backup, we can threaten a 9k power. So that is what makes him so attractive. As I've been hinting at it, we do have Cid Raines here as well. Now it is only a one of, because again, we either have to have Celes, or we have to do a Firion play, or we have to use one of our backups. So it does take a little bit of work to get this all to happen. You know, you can force your opponent to block and then main 2 tap something down with Celes and then use it. But I mean, that's a lot of work to get the effect. You're mostly just wanting to use this as kind of a, the situation came up and it's going to be good here. Now, it's important to note that when it does go from field to the break zone, your opponent discards a card. So with Cid, with Serah, with Zidane, now we've said there's quite a few ways that we have, Locke as well, to make our opponent discard some cards. So Ice still retains that attrition war that you want to be playing with them and always threatening your opponent's hand, which is a good thing I think all Ice decks should have in some amount, because there are key turns where your opponent is just holding on to that last Bahamut or maybe that Raiden, which we've been seeing a lot more play of, and just being able to make them discard 1 card per turn for a couple of turns can keep them off that play. And then Serah here playing a similar role with being able to make them discard. 3-drop 6k is a little underpowered for what we'd like to see, but the discard can, again, as I mentioned, be very powerful. Moving on there, we have some more utility-based cards here. A 1 of Firion. Again, that 4,000 damage can just be helpful. Maybe you attack with something, want to finish off their cards, getting a little bit more value out of your Vivis per se. So attack with a small body 4K, they block because they think they're fine, and then finish off with Firion. It's not going to happen that often against the more, skilled players. They're going to look for easier ways to kill it or just put a low value forward in it that they don't care if it dies to Firion. But being able to clear out one of their guys is always going to be a plus for you. We have 3 Genesis, another ice staple for the entirety of Opus 3, really, and I don't see it going away in Opus 4. Comes down, it gets to dull and freeze something. When it deals damage to your opponent, they're going to discard again. So, as we've mentioned, there's so many ways to focus on this discard element part of the deck if you really want to. And then a 1 of Vayne. This is a card that you're either just going to pitch it early and never see it again, or not care about it, or you're going to hold on to because it's going to help you against maybe a 5-cost delete or something. It's really a card that when it's great, it's absolutely great, and then otherwise it's just a really crappy forward. That said, because of how good it can be in some of those experiences where, again, this is a game where you have to include what would normally be your sideboard cards in your main deck because there is no sideboard. This is one of those, candidates for that category. So, Vayne, I think, again, if you're playing Ice, just put 1 in your list and you'll be so happy you did because it can be so strong at even locking down a Golbez, for example. Then we have our summon package. 3 Belias, there should be no surprise here. We're playing Fire, plus 1,000 haste, first strike. It literally does it all for Fire. Drawing a card always feels great as well. 2 Shiva, sometimes our opponent just has a wall of different things and we need to make sure we're tapping them down to either force a very bad trade for our opponent or we just want to push through for some damage. And then also comboing off that is Zalera. There are some turns that we've seen where people would try to pass their turn, still in your opponent's main 2, use Shiva, 2 other guys, go into your turn, Zalera for value, and swing out from there. Now, because we are only playing 2 and 2 copies, that's a little bit more difficult to pull off, but Zalera is still a surprisingly strong card for what it can do. Again, if you're playing against maybe Wind Water, where they have just a ton of 4-drops, it can be a little bit difficult to get the most value out of it, but still being able to hit 2 or 3 cards of your opponents off this is going to be a huge plus for you and make it worth playing. Lastly, we're going to be talking about our backups. So we have 2 Evoker. Red Mage Matt absolutely loves his 1-drop backups. I know Okimoto has been talking about this as well. Actually, Max has. I think all of them are on this plan except me because I've been stuck on Wind Water. So I think it all comes down to what deck you're playing and how your backups are and if you like it or not. I know Japan is very heavy on the Evoker plan. So I think it's a very interesting discussion point, and maybe at some point we'll do a whole video around Evoker and kind of what decks want it, what decks don't. But I think it's fine in this list after watching him play it, seeing how it's helped smooth out some of his draws. So Evoker absolutely has its place in some of the decks. Then we have Jihl. Again, this is a 2 of 3 of in every single Ice deck. I strongly am adamant that is a 3 of. I think most have cut back to 2 if I'm not mistaken. But I think the S effect is fine when you get the effect off. You always want to see this off an EX burst after your opponent is attacked out, because it's just so strong what it does. But I think it's just fine to keep in your hand for that mid to late game. Yes, it's really unfortunate when you have those turns you just have to play it turn 1, turn 2 for no value, but it makes drawing the second copy or hitting the 3rd EX burst that much more worth it. Then we have 3 Red Mage, choose a forward, it cannot block this turn. Another wonderful staple in red, not going anywhere. Please make sure you are playing 2 or 3 of it. Selfie is a very interesting card here because a red always, or I should say Fire, always wants to be attacking. Being able to threaten that plus 2,000 power can really make things difficult for your opponent. We've talked about several times now how you can set up a board state where you have, say, these 7Ks you don't care about, or maybe you want them to die, like, say, Zidane, that you can say, hey, I'm attacking with a 7K, now it's a 9,000 power, I can threaten. So you have to decide, am I just going to try to chump block this? Am I going to throw my 9K in front of it, or 10K, and hopefully I don't have like a Belias or something? There's a lot of unique situations you can force your opponent into that, because you have all these ping effects or other onboard tricks that your opponent might have to consider. You're going to be coming out ahead more often than not. So I think Selfie is a card that if you want to be attacking, you need to be playing this card in any decks that are using Fire. Black Waltz 2 has been a very interesting one, and I think depending on who you talk to, they're either going to love it and they're playing 3 copies, or they hate it and they're playing 0. I think Matt's right and just having it as this 1 of, because it's great. It's another one of those cards that you can see it at EX burst at the right time, and it feels great. You can see it early game when your opponent still has like a huge hand, and it's so strong what it can remove. And then there's other games where you're in this mid to late game battle, and you say you draw, and you're like, oh, this is gonna do 5,000 damage. All right, guess it's killing nothing. You know, and against those Minwu type decks, you can't rely on Black Waltz into a Firion or something like that to help finish off the damage. So it is a card that can be very, very polarizing in how good you think it's going to be. So that one I will leave up to you guys. I think it's fine as a one of, but I can't see many decks that would say, all right, you know, I'm all in on 3 copies of it. And then we have, as Max called it, Banana Suit Cid, which I will forever refer to it as. This is our searcher for Final Fantasy VI Forward. So again, this is a card that really all brought it together. We saw both Locke and Celes that have these insanely strong S effects that we want to use, and it can be very difficult to rely on strictly drawing them. So when the searcher was spoiled and we got to see it early, it was absolutely a blessing in disguise. Then we have Irvine, again, another one of those just one-ofs, can be really good or really bad, deal 6,000 damage, very straightforward. Again, it kind of in that same category as Vivi. It's so great at just removing that forward when it gives you that kind of tempo generation, but Irvine can be a little bit lacking because it only deals 6,000. So this is another one of those backups I would call a flex spot. Then we have Mog 13. So this allows you to get your Cid and Serah whenever you need them to. It's just a one of. It makes them functionally 2 copies as well. You know, 99 times out of 100, you're going to be getting Serah because you want the discard effect, or you just want another card to discard for ice and kind of make it a 1-drop backup in that sense. So that can help out a little bit too. And then only 2 Devout to finish it off. So, you know, one of the things that I would immediately like to see is 3 Devout, because I've been so hyped on that card for absolutely ever, and I think it's a 3 of, but I can understand that we're getting to a point in Final Fantasy where backups, well, the deck configuration itself is very difficult because the card pool is finally increasing to maybe where it should be. We're having these difficult choices to make on what backups we value, what backups we don't, and cuts have to be made somewhere, and that's where Devout is here as a 2 of. But again, it's so strong for the effect. It lets you get back Vayne if your opponent tries to surprise you with something, and maybe, you know, you discard it on turn 4 and now you need it turn 10 or something. So the utility ultimately that Devout grants you in a deck, I think, was what makes it so strong. And that is it. That is the Sabin Suplex Fire Ice Final Fantasy VI, a little bit of Final Fantasy IX in there as well, deck spotlight. We really hope you guys enjoy this, and again, huge thanks to Red Mage Matt for putting this together and finally getting the list out there. If you guys like this video, make sure to drop us a like. That really helps us out. Drop a comment what you want to see next, and of course subscribe for future Final Fantasy trading card game content. So on behalf of myself and the rest of the Six Stages Gaming crew, thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next video. Have a good one. This video made possible thanks to our Patreon supporters. Thank you to our honorary sages.